Are just now, and it's about almost 2 o'clock, just now gaining access to portions of the building where the plane hit because the fires were too intense.
One ray of hope. The Pentagon is undergoing a major renovation, and some of the offices in the path of the plane were vacant.
We're trying to find out who made it out okay and account for the people that may not have made it out.
When the plane hit, Defense Secretary Rumsfeld dashed from his office on the other side of the building.
And proceeded down towards the impact point in the building. It actually went outside the building and was helpful in getting several people that were injured onto stretchers, and then came back into the building and was in the National Military Command Center.
With smoke hanging in the air of the command center, Rumsfeld ordered aircraft carriers, amphibious ships, cruisers and destroyers to New York and Washington, where they can serve as floating hospitals, help with the cleanup, and provide air defense against the possibility of more attacks. Rescue efforts are a long way from over, but the FBI is already combing the debris for clues to who was behind this. The Pentagon has put all its bases on the highest state of alert, and the State Department has done the same thing with American embassies around the world. The early suspicion is that Osama bin Laden was behind this, and U.S. officials say eventually there will be military retaliation. Dan?
David Martin reporting live from the Pentagon. President Bush is just reported to have landed at Andrews Air Force Base just outside of Washington. He is said to be going to the White House itself. From there, he will address the American people tonight. We will see and hear it, of course, live on CBS News. As regards the explosions in Kabul, Afghanistan, a senior Pentagon official now says, and I quote him, "That is not a U.S. strike." Repeat, not a U.S. strike. This despite reports from the scene by at least one reporter on the scene who said that it was a missile strike. A senior Pentagon official says that it's simply not true. It wasn't a U.S. strike. Now, to punish those behind today's attacks, the United States and its people must first determine who they are. We are a country that believes in facts and the pursuit of facts. The facts are few about who's responsible for this. There has been much speculation, italicize, underscore the word speculation about that today, with Osama bin Laden, the renegade Saudi millionaire, frequently mentioned. No one knows who did this. CBS's Jim Stewart in Washington is following the investigation, checking his sources, and has this live report. Jim.
Dan, apparently we have a little bit more now than just speculation. U.S. intelligence officials and law enforcement no longer have just a theory about today's unprecedented attack. They now have some evidence, and it all points to Osama bin Laden. Sources tell CBS News that hours after the attack, intelligence agents detected what one official is calling significant indicators that the suicide planes were hijacked by members of al-Qaeda, the terrorist group that reports to bin Laden. Sources describe the intelligence as communications intercepts, but would not provide any details. It's not definitive, said one official, but it is persuasive.
Sensing that bin Laden would quickly become a suspect, Afghanistan's ruling Taliban party, which has been giving him safe refuge, called a press conference. We do not allow Osama bin Laden to operate from our land, the Taliban said, warning the U.S. not to take any, quote, speedy actions to retaliate. Meanwhile, law enforcement sources said there had been no credible claims for the joint attacks and that intelligence had picked up no specific threats aimed at targets inside the United States before the attacks took place. Within minutes of today's attacks, officials were pointing to the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center by a group with ties to bin Laden, citing it as proof that bin Laden has never given up on his dream to destroy the symbol of America's economic power. And in recent months, analysts say bin Laden has only become more and more sophisticated in his attempts to strike at the United States. They point specifically to his simultaneous attack on 2 U.S. embassies in East Africa.
They also went directly against a U.S. destroyer, which was heavily guarded, and they did put a hole in that ship, the USS Cole. So they have a track record of conducting attacks that one would think they might not be capable of.
Late today, the U.S. intelligence community was rapidly sorting through a priority list of potential suspects within the U.S. for electronic eavesdropping, with sources saying the number may reach into the hundreds.
There is also specific physical evidence that investigators are eager to examine. First are the transcripts of communications between the suicide aircraft and ground controllers, and second are cockpit tape recordings of conversations in the doomed aircraft themselves. The working theory is that the hijackers were pilots themselves and forcefully took over the controls to dive the jets straight into their targets. Dan?
Jim Stewart, good work with getting that new information about increasing evidence, real hard evidence, nothing conclusive yet, that bin Laden is tied to this. But do U.S. intelligence officials know where bin Laden is? Still in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Baluchistan? Do they have any idea?
As recently as the beginning of the week, they had reason to believe that he was hanging out in the two locations that he has most frequently been at in Afghanistan, and that's the cities of Jalalabad and Kandahar. Now, he travels frequently, Dan, and he does so by SUV and caravans with sometimes as many as 100 guards. It's a safe bet that he is on the move again tonight.
United States Secretary of Defense, thank you, Jim Stewart. U.S. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld has begun a briefing at the Pentagon. We pick it up in progress live.
Ladies and gentlemen, as the Secretary just said, today we have watched the tragedy of an outrageous act of barbaric terrorism carried out by fanatics against both civilians and military people. Acts that have killed and maimed many innocent and decent citizens of our country. I extend my condolences to the entire Department of Defense families, military and civilian, and to the families of all those throughout our nation who lost loved ones. I think that
control. In short, we're making the full force of the Department of Health and Human Services, both its resources and medical expertise available to the areas that need our assistance. We've also this afternoon activated the United States Public Health Service Commission Corps, which consists of approximately 6,000 health professionals. We also are giving backup assistance to the 500-bed ship Comfort from the United States Navy. Americans all over are calling up and asking what they can do. The best thing they can do is respond to this great call by volunteering to give blood. We need Americans to continue to answer that call. No matter where you live, please do your civic duty and assist us by donating blood. It is our primary job is to make sure Americans harmed by this tragedy get the help that they need. We will remain in constant contact with the governors, the mayors, public health officials, and other local officials to make sure that all their needs are being met. It is a sad day, but America and all of its citizens certainly share tonight in the grief that it's been caused. And as the President and everybody in his administration have said, we, the government, will continue to operate and continue to provide the services to all Americans.
One of the most cherished freedoms is the freedom of movement, the ability to move freely and safely. But today that freedom was attacked. But we will restore that freedom throughout the national transportation system as soon as possible.
We're looking at a picture also on Capitol Hill where the Senate and House leadership is preparing to speak, flanked by hundreds of members of the U.S. Congress. Here's the Speaker of the House, Dennis Hastert.
The hearts and souls and feelings of the victims and the families that were a part of this great tragedy that happened in this country today. Our prayers and thoughts and words of consolation goes out to all those who have suffered. But one thing that happens here in this place is when American suffers and when people perpetrate acts against this country, we as a Congress and as a government stand united, and we stand together. Senators and House members, Democrats and Republicans will stand shoulder to shoulder to fight this evil that's been perpetrated on this nation. We will stand together to make sure that those who have brought forth this evil deed will pay the price. We're not sure who this is yet, But we have our suspicions. And when that is justified and when those suspicions are justified, we will act. We will stand with the president, we will stand with this government, and we will stand as Americans together through this time. Thank you.
Today's despicable acts were an assault on our people and on our freedom. As the representatives of the people, we are here to declare that our resolve has not been weakened by these horrific and cowardly acts. Congress will convene tomorrow. And we will speak with one voice to condemn these attacks, to comfort the victims and their families, to commit our full support to the effort to bring those responsible to justice. We, Republicans and Democrats, House and Senate, stand strongly united behind the president and will work together to ensure that the full resources of the government are brought to bear in these efforts. Our heartfelt thoughts and our fervent prayers are with the injured and the families of those who have been lost.
We know as a nation, as we said, our thoughts and prayers are with those families and those injured and those who are the casualties of today's attack. We also remember those thousands of people who are rescue workers. We ask now that we all bow our heads in a moment of silence and remembrance. Thank you.
A pointed display of bipartisan unity at this critical moment in U.S. history. It seemed like a spontaneous singing of God Bless America by scores of members of the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, seriously trying to send a message of unity during this difficult moment. Let's go back to Paula Zahn in New York, where she's got more details on this tragic day in Manhattan. Paula?
Thanks so much, Wolf. I think all day long you have seen the images replayed of exactly what happened here in New York City. The city, a victim of multiple attacks by hijacked commercial airlines. Joining me right now is Matt Cornelius, who was in the unfortunate position of being mid-level in Tower 1, the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Matt, thanks for joining us tonight. What happened? Where were you?
Well, I just arrived at work probably about 8:40 a.m. I put my lunch away, and I was putting getting ready to start the day when all of a sudden we heard this tremendous crash. It was a really loud sound, followed by a sharp jolt in the building, and then the floor kind of seemed to wave.
We are looking at this incredibly dramatic shot of the impact of the American Airlines hitting the North Tower. You were not aware at all of what could have caused it.
We had no idea. Obviously, we knew something had struck the building. Somebody screamed out, an airplane's hit the building. But I think that was just a guess. And when I thought about that, I thought probably a private plane, because you often see them flying around the World Trade Center. No one could have ever thought that it was a commercial jet plane of that size.
And your immediate instinct, I suppose, was to get out of the building.
Yeah.
Describe the evacuation.
Well, it wasn't, because people hadn't really arrived to work yet, it wasn't very organized. We basically decided...
Now that actually represents the second attack that happened 18 minutes after your building was struck.
Right. So when we got struck, everyone basically started running for the stairways. And we went in immediately to the stairways and started our way down.
Were people pushing and shoving, or was it an orderly exit from the building?
People were confused at first, but once we were in the stairway, people were very orderly.
How long did it take you to get out of the building?
About 45 minutes. Some people were upset. They had gone through the bomb in '93.
How could it take so long to get out of the building? You had 65 flights of stairs. You're a young man, but one would think you could get out of there quicker.
We moved very quickly, probably 15 minutes to the 40th floor. And then after that, we got held up. There were firefighters coming up the stairs, police officers, and I believe FBI agents. So they were coming up. And there were people, there was a man in a wheelchair who they were trying to assist, so we kind of had a hold for him. But people remained calm throughout this and kept saying, you know, we're going to take it one stair at a time, everybody's going to get out. I think we weren't aware of the situation. We thought it was an isolated event. I think had we known what was going on, it would have been a different story. But
these pictures obviously show the unspeakable horror and tragedy, the fallout from which we're only just beginning to grasp. Once you got out of the building, at what point did you become aware of what had truly happened?
Well, I would say the minute as we came out of the building, actually exited the complex, the police officers were screaming, "Don't look up, don't look back, just go." And I, of course, looked back, and I saw that the second tower was indeed on fire. And that's when it hit me that this was something major. I mean, this was a real catastrophic event. And actually, when we came out of the stairs, there was a lot of devastation in the lobby, and actually the center of the complex, the plaza area, there was a lot of debris and some bodies. I mean, it was truly awful.
We have some shots now that we'd like to show you of what some people have described almost as a nuclear winter when they talked about the amount of soot coming down on those of you who were fleeing these buildings. Now that you've been able to absorb what happened, what's going through your head tonight? You must feel like a very lucky man.
I feel very lucky. I'm so thankful to be alive. My heart goes out to those who don't know about their loved ones or have lost loved ones, and it's still very surreal. I mean, I look down behind us and can't believe that my office building that I go to every day is gone.
Matt, before you go any further, we were just looking at shots of the countless number of New York firefighters that were on the scene. We are just getting information from a union official of some of the 400 firefighters that initially went into that area. 200 may have perished. Matt, we appreciate your sharing your thoughts with us tonight on this incredibly tragic day of our American history. Let's go back to Wolf Blitzer. Once again, Wolf, New York City officials are not confirming, nor is the Pentagon, exactly how many people were injured here or how many people died. I know Governor Pataki of New York was saying earlier this evening it will be many, many days before we have any of those numbers.
Those numbers are being collected, but I'm sure it's way too early, as you point out, Paula, to have even a rough guess how high that number will eventually go. Just to recap once again, President Bush preparing to address the nation in less than an hour or so, around 8:30 p.m. Eastern, an Oval Office address for President Bush from the White House. CNN senior White House correspondent John King is back on the North Lawn of the White House. John, you're back in the briefing room now. John, you were listening to that briefing when we went to the Capitol Hill congressional leadership statements that were being made. Was there any hard news that came out of that briefing?
Indeed, there was, Wolf. Some details on the emergency responses taking place. The Department of Health and Human Services, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, other agencies taking steps to provide medical and other disaster relief personnel, but also from the Treasury Secretary, Norman Mineta, a glimpse of what will be the near future, at least, for Americans now traveling around the country. Mr. Mineta saying as a result of this, first and foremost, that he will make the decision tomorrow if and when U.S. commercial air traffic can resume, all planes grounded at least through noon, he said, and when Americans do go to an airport or a train station in the future, they are likely to see a much higher level of security.
To increase traveler security. Travelers will indeed see increased security measures at our airports, train stations, and other key sites. There will be higher levels of surveillance, more stringent searches. Airport curbside luggage check-in will no longer be allowed. There will be more security officers and random identification checks. Travelers may experience some inconveniences, but we ask for your patience.
Now, the president is in the Oval Office with his national security team preparing for that address to the American people. About 50 minutes away from now, that address from the Oval Office. 4 members of the president's cabinet briefing here. They refuse to take any questions. White House saying that these cabinet agencies want to gather more information. Attorney General John Ashcroft vowing, though, that the perpetrators of these terrorist attacks, he said, would be discovered and punished. And again, much of the information dealing with the relief effort underway over at the Pentagon and up in New York City. The Secretary of Health and Human Services, Tommy Thompson, urging Americans, no matter where they live, to donate blood. He said that is one urgent priority right now. Wolf.
Okay, John King, we'll be back to you. But meanwhile, I want to bring in the former Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, who joins us here in our Washington Bureau. Secretary Albright, do you have a sense, you studied this situation, 4 years at the United Nations, 4 years at the State Department, who was responsible for this attack?
I think it's impossible to tell at this time, Wolf, and it's very important to get all the facts straight. But what is essential is that the countries of the world who believe in democracy and human rights stand together. And the statements that have come out, I think, from other world leaders are very important. We all have to stand together. I ache for America tonight, but I know that we will rise to the challenge because we have the best system in the world.
Is there, given the earmarkings of this highly sophisticated, very coordinated attack, that some sort of state sponsorship was behind it?
I think it's tempting to speculate, Wolf, but I think that it's probably wrong at this time to make statements that point the finger. We need to look at the facts very carefully and then respond at a time and place of our choosing. We have the best military in the world. I have the greatest confidence in our military, and I support President Bush. We are all waiting to hear what he has to say. I think the unity of this country is now essential.
But even at a time of unity, we've heard from many members of Congress, Democrats and Republicans today, members of Congress lamenting what they say was an enormous intelligence and security failure. Intelligence in the sense that the U.S. apparently had no advance indication that this was about to happen, and a security failure that 4 planes could be hijacked simultaneously.
I think we will have a lot of time for investigation and finger-pointing. I think today we need to offer our condolences to the families of the victims and the bravery of those who have rescued people, and remember that this country is a country of laws, and those who oppose us are only countries that do not believe in a system of laws and democracy and the individual freedom.
You just heard the Transportation Secretary, Norm Mineta, say that travel in the United States is not going to be as relatively easy as it's been. There's going to be much tighter restrictions for Americans. They will have to endure what many Europeans have been enduring now for several years, given the terrorist operations unfolding there and other parts of the world. It's going to cause a reaction, as you well can understand, from the American public.
I think that's the least of our problems. I know when I fly, I actually welcome it when I'm asked questions, and I think it is up to all of us to cooperate. But America can't be shut down. We have to remember that we thrive as an open society, and I think we have to take all the precautions and to try to find the balance between the freedom for which we are noted and the security which we need.
Once the United States learns conclusively who was responsible for this coordinated attack, what should the response be militarily and diplomatically, politically?
Well, I think militarily I will leave that to the defense people. I do know that we have the means to respond in whatever way we want to. We do have the best and strongest military. Diplomatically, I think it is essential to be in touch with our friends and allies, to seek their unified support. Terrorists know no boundaries, they know no limits, and this has been brought home to America this time, but other countries are being threatened, and we need to all stand together. Terrorism can only be dealt with internationally.
You were the Secretary of State when the U.S. embassies in East Africa were bombed. Many Americans were killed, many other nationals were killed as well. The U.S., while you were Secretary of State, did bomb some bases in Afghanistan believed to have been associated with Osama bin Laden. A Sudanese factory was bombed. Clearly, if Osama bin Laden was responsible for this current attack, which has been widely speculated, of course, the U.S. retaliatory strike at that time didn't appear to slow him down at all.
Well, there's no way to prove that, and the truth is that my worst day as Secretary of State was when those embassies were bombed and when I brought the bodies home and met with the Kenyans and Tanzanians who had been injured. The United States has to respond. We have to respond on the basis of the facts we have, not on the basis of speculation, and I think that the important part is for us to all stand together and be supportive of President Bush.
We're going to be showing some pictures, Madam Secretary, of some U.S. warships. Recently, we're in Norfolk, moving out into the Atlantic Ocean, up the Atlantic coast to get out of port. We're taking a look at some destroyers and some frigates now. These are pictures of U.S. Navy vessels leaving the largest U.S. naval facility in Virginia, in Norfolk, clearly perhaps sending some sort of signal, some sort of sign to others who may be out there. What is that message?
That America is strong and cannot be shut down, that we have the means to bring about some kind of a response to this, and that we have the strongest military in the world, and that we're proud of our military.
General Colin Powell, your successor at the State Department, returning tonight from a visit to South America, from Lima, Peru. What should he be doing right now? What do we assume he is doing to generate international diplomatic support for the United States position and for perhaps some retaliatory U.S. response?
I can understand that he must be very frustrated not to be in Washington, because I was not in Washington when the embassy bombings happened. I was in Rome, and I came back right away, and what I'm sure he is doing is being in touch with his counterparts and mustering the kind of international support that is necessary, and I'm sure will be forthcoming from our friends and allies, because we're in all of this together.
Madam Secretary, it was good for you to join us on this horrible day in American history. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Wolf.
Back to you in New York, Paula.
Thanks so much, Wolf. We're going to try to give you a better perspective of the state of paralysis here in New York City tonight. Once again, we cannot confirm the number of injured, the number of killed here today, but we have just gotten confirmation from a union representing New York City firefighters that as many as half of the 400 firefighters that were initially sent to the World Trade Center area are presumably dead tonight. We have been told that victims have been transferred to some 70 area hospitals. There are pleas for donations of blood from New York City residents. I, in fact, tried to donate blood today, and there was as much as a 5-hour line of volunteers all trying to heed this plea. Right now, I'm going to check in with Greg Clarkin, who joins us from St. Vincent's Hospital, where more than several hundred of the injured were taken. Greg, what can you tell us tonight?
Yeah, we're about a block away from St. Vincent's Hospital in Lower Manhattan. This is one of the locations that has been set up since for a triage unit, as a triage unit since early this morning. Really an incredible scene. Hospital. What you see is dozens and dozens of hospital workers outfitted in their scrubs, just basically awaiting victims to treat. At this point, what we're hearing is that the pace has slowed down considerably. We've just been briefed by the president of St. Vincent's, that's David Campbell. He says at the moment there are 319 patients at St. Vincent's. Of that, 50 to 55 are listed in critical condition. He also confirmed that there were 3 deaths at St. Vincent's. Also, New York Governor George Pataki stopped by. He spoke to the doctors as well as the victims. One of of the doctors overseeing the operations in the emergency room today described some of the injuries that they saw early on. He said at the very early stages of this tragedy, what they saw were severe burns, a lot of trauma, and a lot of heart-related problems. Now, he said the heart attacks and cardiac arrest could be from pre-existing heart conditions or possibly induced by the trauma that the people saw at the World Trade Center today. Now, tomorrow they expect to get a different type of injury. Right now, the Trade Center is considered a hot zone. There are no rescue efforts underway, the doctor said, but tomorrow they expect that hot zone to be lifted, rescue workers to go back in. What they will be expecting then is what they call crush injuries, and that could be broken bones, anything that happens by people being buried underneath rubble, kidney failure, dehydration, and the like. They're expecting to see a whole different variety of injuries tomorrow. So again, from St. Vincent's, which has been a triage unit throughout the day, the scene has slowed down a little bit, but they do expect it to pick back up when the rescue efforts resume. Paula, back to you.
All right, thanks so much, Greg. And during your report, I just got more information that the New York Police Department now confirms that there are 78 police officers on its force that are missing tonight. Right now, I'm going to turn to Richard Holbrooke, former UN ambassador, to provide some sort of perspective for us this evening. Mr. Holbrooke, we have heard General Shelton describe today's vicious acts as outrageous acts of barbaric terrorism. Senator Orrin Hatch called it an act of war. Senator John Warner calling it the most tragic hour of American history. What is your perspective on this evening?
Well, first of all, Paula, as a New Yorker and somebody who had the honor of being guarded by the New York City Police and working with the firemen, I am stricken beyond words at the information you've just mentioned about the death toll among the police and the firemen. I used to work in that building and was there next door during the previous attack, and as in the 1993 case, New York City citizens have responded in this extraordinary way. Your description of the attempt to give blood is so emblematic, those lines, and I'm just heartbroken about this. In terms of your question, and having listened to your interview with Madeleine Albright, I just want to add something to what she said, and that is this. In the past, Osama bin Laden and other terrorists who do not represent national governments, a distinction which is critically important, but are sheltered in various countries in the world, including Afghanistan, sometimes North Korea, Iraq, Libya, have played this shell game about where the government that shelters them and protects them says, well, we don't know where they are. I think it is absolutely essential for the United States to lead an international effort now that makes clear that any country which shelters people is part of an act of war against the United States. The United States, Paula, cannot make the response alone. It is true, as Madeleine said, that we have the finest military force in the world, and I've been privileged to work with them for over 30 years in Vietnam, in Bosnia, and all over the world. But I will tell you that unless we have international united front of the European allies, the Russians, the Chinese, and I want to stress this, the moderate Arab states, which must close ranks to get the extremists who are behind this, we're not going to be able to succeed. This is the beginning, after we get through the rescue phase, after we find out how the security failure occurred that you referred to, that Wolf Blitzer referred to earlier, we're going to have to turn to an absolutely non-stop diplomatic effort to create the pressure behind which we can take the necessary military action against this act of war.
All right, I hear what you're saying, Ambassador, but it was Henry Kissinger who said earlier on today that we will be able to, or the United States at least, will be able to judge its friends by their level of support in trying to figure out who unleashed this fury today. What, though, realistically, do you think will happen in terms of resistance from some of these countries?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question. I heard the interview with Henry Kissinger, and he and I are in full agreement on this. Any government which shelters the people who did this, has to be held equally responsible for it as an act of war. And we are going to have to mobilize an international coalition for that position as we prepare to take the necessary military responses. And I know that Henry agreed with that because I listened to the interview.
Oh, no, I don't think I'm saying that anybody has misinterpreted the interview here, but I think there has been some suggestion by other guests that you may not get complete support here.
Well, I don't know whether we'll get complete support or not. The Taliban is denying any influence in this thing, but all the evidence seems to suggest that. John King and others on your excellent coverage have suggested that the administration is 90% sure it's Osama bin Laden. If some countries don't participate, let them understand that they're joining a coalition of terrorists who have declared war on the United States. The key nations involved are going to be the moderate Arab states, the Russians, and the Chinese and other countries which must isolate the cause of this. Osama bin Laden is not a government, but if he is indeed, as the administration appears to believe, behind this, anyone trafficking with him should be on notice that that is tantamount to an act of war by a government. And I talked this afternoon to the Secretary General of the UN, Kofi Annan, who is trying to deal with the consequences of this for the UN. He's going to have to decide whether to postpone or cancel some major UN meetings that are coming up in New York, a children's summit in 10 days. And he has been talking to Arab leaders, and I think he will be very supportive of this. The UN will meet in General Assembly tomorrow to start the condemnation process, and we're going to have to conduct diplomacy alongside rescue and finally decide what the correct military response is.
Mr. Holbrook, we're going to have to leave it there this evening. Thank you very much for your insights and some of your poignant thoughts on what it was like to have once worked in one of those buildings that no longer exists. Joining me right now is Jeff Greenfield, who has some thoughts on the magnitude of what was witnessed here today. I know Senator Dodd earlier today compared this to the equivalent of the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
Right, and you know, he said, I don't think that overstates it. We may find out it will understate it. When Franklin Roosevelt told us that many American lives were lost on that December 8th speech, he was talking about 2,400 American servicemen and women. Unless a miracle happened 2.5 miles south of here, we are looking at a death toll that could dwarf that. The largest act of violence in American history, Oklahoma City, 168 dead. More people than that died just in the plains. And when you and I as New Yorkers look and we realize the landscape of New York has changed, the Empire State Building is once again the largest building, I would suggest to you the landscape of America has changed. We are going to wake up tomorrow in a different country. Our luck has run out. 6 people died at the World Trade Center in '93. We saved thousands more because the buildings didn't collapse. We averted terrorist acts in the past, not today. And I think we will not get on an airplane the same way again. We will not feel the same way about our security again. I looked at some numbers, Paula. The largest number of American dead ever in one day in this country was Antietam, the Civil War battle in Maryland in 1862, 22,000 dead. I hope to God we don't approach that number when all is said and done, but we're going to be possibly in that ballpark. And I think tomorrow, in some ways, may even be a worse day than today because the sheer magnitude of this event has kind of got everybody just excited and wondering. Tomorrow, the reality sets in.
And I think you also talked earlier today how that reality turns from a sense of shock and in some cases a sense of outrage.
We've already heard
what
how absolutely
been handed this country.
And one of the biggest issues we're going to be facing is drawing the line between a response that equals the horror of what was done and restraint.
All right, got to cut you off here and go back quickly to Wolf Blitzer. I think Dick Armey is joining you.
Right, Paula. Just to remind our viewers that in a little bit more than a half an hour from now, President Bush will be in the Oval Office to address the American public. He's preparing his remarks right now, but our congressional correspondent, Jonathan Karl, is up on Capitol Hill, and he has the House Majority Leader, Dick Armey, with him. John?
Well, Wolf, an amazing day up here, and we just had about 200 members of Congress, Democrats, Republicans, senators, and members of the House on the steps of the Capitol with a message. Now, we have here the Majority Leader, Dick Armey, Republican leader in the House of Representatives. Mr. Armey, you were one of those in the top leadership of the Congress that were whisked away from the Capitol this morning to a secure location, a classified location. What was it like in that room all day today?
Well, we had the bipartisan leadership of both the House and the Senate. We were, of course, obviously, like everybody in America, seeking information, trying to understand exactly what's happening, where is it coming from, who's responsible, and how do we respond, measuring the threat to the nation, and preparing ourselves to bring the members of Congress back to work at the appropriate time under the right circumstances and make the point that I made earlier. You may scar democracy, but you don't shut it down. We'll be back to work tomorrow. We think of this as a horrible criminal act. It is just inhumane. It's insane. And the American House and Senate, the Congress of this nation, as the president of this nation, will address that tonight. We will address the nation's business this week, and we will continue the process of finding the people who are responsible and bringing them to justice.
Now, I understand that at least 4 times during the day, the vice president briefed the members of leadership that were in that room at that classified location. What did you learn about that 4th plane, the plane that landed in western Pennsylvania?
Well, we learned some things about that. At this point, the information is classified. It is clear that we do have a good investigation going forward. We are gathering information. There is a confidentiality on what we know, but we do know that this is a serious, premeditated crime, and that I can say without any doubt or hesitation, is an international crime, and we will be able to find the people responsible in America. I believe, with the cooperation of all civilized nations, will bring these people to justice.
Now, over the Capitol Police radios this morning, there was a report that there was a plane headed for the Capitol building. What can you tell us about that? Was the Capitol in danger at any time during the day?
I don't know. We've tried to distill exactly what that report might have been. It could have been somebody's interpretation of the heading of either the plane that went to the Pentagon or the plane that went down in Pennsylvania. But there was a concern about the Capitol that caused Capitol Police, I think, correctly and prudently to vacate the building.
All right. Well, Mr. Leader, I thank you very much for joining us. And Wolf, tomorrow, both the House and the Senate will reconvene. This message that wants to be sent here is that terrorism will not stop the people's business, the work of the Congress from going forward.
All right, Jonathan Karl on Capitol Hill, thank you very much, and thank Mr. Army as well. I want to bring in Senator Bob Graham of Florida. He's the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Of course, he's been receiving regular briefings throughout the day. We're hearing a lot of suspicions, Senator Graham, about who may have been responsible. Can you share what you know about that responsibility with our viewers?
I would agree with Madeleine Albright. It's premature at this point to be identifying who the prime suspect might be. The number of potential suspects based on the complexity of this operation is relatively small, and I think we will soon be able to identify who the culprit is, but tonight is not the night.
Has anybody definitively made any conclusions in the briefings with you and your colleagues about responsibility? Because, as you know, a lot of finger pointing at Osama bin Laden has been going on throughout the day.
No, at this point, there has not been a single primary suspect identified.
Given the nature of this operation,
the U.S. falls target to the worst terrorist assault in American history tonight. 4 hijacked jetliners destined for disaster.
It went straight down, and it crashed, and I seen the smoke and the flame come up, and it was terrible.
One of those planes was en route to San Francisco, but it and the 45 people on board never made it. One of those was a Santa Clara University student.
And tonight, a country full of fear and despair. How could this have happened here and now?
From the fastest growing news station in Northern California, News Channel 11 at 5 starts now.
Good evening, I'm Sandy Costablanco.
And I'm Brad Hicks. Thanks for joining us, everyone, on this historic and terrible day. We're going to begin with some of the most alarming pictures from today's terrorist attacks on the United States.
I hope I live. I hope I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car.
That cloud of ash and debris from the tumbling World Trade Center. We have learned that half of the 400 New York firefighters who went into the burning World Trade Center did not come out. After the pictures, we get the story. 78 police officers missing, and of course that Santa Clara University student dead. Brian Glazer is live in New York, where the attack on America began. Brian.
Sirens continue to echo throughout New York City as emergency crews respond to one of the worst disasters in American history, the World Trade Center, now in its 12th hour after it was devastated by 2 commercial jetliners, presumably hijacked by armed terrorists. The latest statistics now from the devastation is that there are all 7 buildings of the World Trade Center are threatened. At least 3 have crumbled. A Marriott hotel also faces the possibility of severe structural damage and collapse. We know that approximately 200 firefighters are listed as missing in action, presumed injured or dead, fighting the fire that consumed the World Trade Center earlier today and continues burning. At least 78 police officers from the New York City Police Department are feared missing in action. At this time, the death toll is unknown. Hundreds, possibly thousands. 40-plus emergency rooms in New York City overwhelmed by patients injured in today's disaster. They are being trucked out to areas such as New Jersey, Connecticut, and Long Island for treatment. The American Red Cross asking for blood donations as soon as possible. The National Guard, at least 3,000 troops massing 50 miles north of the city of New York. Governor Pataki says they'll be in Manhattan in 24 to 48 hours. That's the latest situation from the island of Manhattan, where night has fallen on this terrible day. Back to you.
And Brian, my understanding is the area where the buildings collapsed is what is called a hot zone. The rescuers are in fact not allowed in there until tomorrow. Is that your understanding from the scene?
My understanding right now is that it is a hot zone, that rescue crews are being kept back from the area. Whether or not it will be until tomorrow that they get in there, I cannot tell you that for sure. What I can tell you is that from 14th Street South, roughly where Greenwich Village starts, has been sealed off to all pedestrian and civilian traffic. It is open for all emergency vehicles to come and go as necessary. Every now and then it gets very quiet here. As you can hear, the 8 o'clock bells are now ringing in the steeples above New York, and yet they will be overwhelmed momentarily by another wave of ambulance sirens. This situation still remains very sketchy as far as information in response to your question.
There are several buildings around the World Trade Center you were talking about before that could also fall down. Can you tell us more about that?
We know that there's a Marriott hotel that used to be, we believe, the Vista Hotel, which you may recall was evacuated and practically destroyed back in 1993 when the World Trade Center bombing was held by another terrorist activity. That building now, we understand, was evacuated many hours ago and faces the possibility of collapse. There are many buildings, all very tightly compressed in that area. So once one building collapses, it could be a domino effect. Same with spreading of fire, as we've seen throughout the day. There's really no way to tell when this situation will actually be officially under control.
Okay, Brian Glazer live in New York, at the scene where the 2 twin towers of the World Trade Center and the 7th tower collapsed. Brian, thank you.
And about an hour after the World Trade Center attacks, a 3rd hijacked plane crashed into the Pentagon building in Washington, D.C. The fiery crash collapsed one side of the structure. The American Airlines Flight 77 took off from Dulles Airport outside Washington, D.C. It was headed to Los Angeles. And the 4th hijacked plane crashed just after 7 o'clock our time this morning, southeast of Pennsylvania. United Airlines Flight 93 left Newark, New Jersey, and was on its way to San Francisco. 12 minutes before the flight headed to SFO, it crashed. A passenger called 911 and reportedly said, quote, "We are being hijacked. We are being hijacked." United Airlines Flight 93 slammed into a cornfield about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. Local officials say none of the 45 people on board the Boeing 757 jetline survived. The plane crashed about 7:10 this morning, California time.
It was just coming down like it was going to land, but instead of landing, it just went nose straight into the ground.
CNN says top U.S. officials now believe the terrorists on board may have been trying to crash the jet into either the White House, Camp David, or the U.S. Capitol building. The United Flight 93 from Newark, New Jersey, to San Francisco was carrying 38 passengers. 2 pilots and 5 flight attendants were on board.
The victim stories are beginning to come in. We have learned that the producer of Frasier was on that plane, the first one that crashed into the World Trade Center. We've learned that Barbara Olson, who many of you have seen on CNN, was on the plane that crashed into the Pentagon. And of course, a young woman, a junior at Santa Clara University, was on Flight 93 headed to San Francisco. Many of the families expecting their loved ones on Flight 93 heard the news of this crash well before the plane's scheduled landing time around 11:19 this morning. Instead, they grieved at home instead of coming to San Francisco International, where they knew the inevitable. Beth Willant joins us now live from SFO with the latest information there. Beth?
Well, Brad, United Flight 93 is well known here at San Francisco International by Bay Area business people, particularly those who work in biotech and pharmaceutical industries. They frequently fly to Newark, New Jersey. The United terminal today was almost paralyzed when the doomed flight never arrived. 11:19 is when United Flight 93 should have arrived at San Francisco International, filled with Bay Area business people. Instead, the terminal was heavy with a sense of hollowness and defeat. Stranded passengers sat dazed. Clergy members and rabbis rushed in to comfort the families of the 38 passengers and 7 United crew members.
I just got the emergency call, and so I'll go there and listen. Offer the sacrament, prayers, things like that if I can.
But the families of the crash victims never showed up at United's Red Carpet Club. They already knew for 5 hours what had happened.
The press coverage we've had, it's probably unlikely that a lot of families will come here.
Okay.
How much of the public do you think is unaware of what's going on and will come here expecting to pick people up off the flight? I mean, it's a little different than the normal situation.
In the meantime, United employees had to put their emotions about losing 7 crew members on hold and focus on helping the stranded passengers.
These are just phone cards. One is for 10 minutes, one is for 30 minutes. If employees or passengers need to make phone calls to home or whatever, then they can use these phones.
Later, armed with boxes of Kleenex, their faces showed the strain of losing friends and fearing more terrorist attacks. Now, most of the United workers have been sent home, and they won't be back until the FAA opens this airport again. Also, United officials are telling us that they plan to meet with some of the victims' families in an undisclosed location in Millbrae, and they plan to do it privately. Brad?
Okay, thank you, Beth.
United Airlines issued a statement saying that its prayers are with the passengers and crew of these flights and anyone on the ground who was affected. The airline went on to say it is working with all of the relevant authorities to obtain further information about today's tragic and terrible events. If you need information from either airlines, here are the toll-free numbers to call. You can reach United Airlines at 1-800-932-8555. American Airlines at 1-800-245-0999. Now, if you didn't get these numbers, grab a pen and a paper. We'll return these numbers to you later in the newscast.
Of course, there is no idea yet how many people were killed in the World Trade Center, how many people were killed in the Pentagon, but the death toll on the 4 airplanes that crashed appears to be 266. Now, when these planes stopped flying this morning, all operations at SFO essentially came to a standstill. The airport has had increased security all day. Authorities have been evacuated the terminals. Thousands of people were stranded in the Bay Area. Cameron Harper is also at SFO with the newest information on this. What can you tell us, Cameron?
And Brad, what they are telling us now is that the earliest flight operations may resume here tomorrow, and we specify May is 12 noon. Hopefully they were going to get flights out earlier, but it looks like that may not happen. We're waiting for new information from an airport spokesman, and we'll pass that along to you just as soon as we get it. But take a look around. We're in the new international terminal, barely a year old, and this place would normally be filled with people moving from flight to flight this time of day. But it is all but empty now, except for essential airport personnel and the media. The tension here became chillingly obvious when a Thai Airlines jumbo jet was escorted in by F-16 fighters, which peeled away when the airliner landed without incident.
It's not going to be just hop in and get on your plane and go.
Whenever this airport reopens, officials say security will be tighter than we've ever seen it. More scrutiny of bags, passengers questioned about where they're going and why.
You may have to open all your bags going through security. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen. That's a possibility, though.
That security started with the evacuation of the airport about 11 o'clock this morning.
Please evacuate the terminal building.
As the PA blared for passengers to move toward the exits, police with bomb-sniffing dogs began a search of the terminal.
We're trying to relieve some of their fears. We're here, we're in place, we have a contingency plan in place.
And we're trying to provide a safe environment for everybody.
On a normal day, almost 100,000 people pass through SFO, but by the time the evacuation began, officials say only about 3,000 people were still in the terminal. Those stuck here were put on buses to nearby hotels to wait things out.
Your mind keeps going to what has happened here in the United States with all the technology and the security. How could so many planes be hijacked?
And that is the question so many of us are asking tonight. You look at that sign, says flights will resume at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. That is probably wishful thinking at this point. This terminal, this brand sparkling new international terminal, is now one of the newest manifestations of fear in the country. Brad?
Cameron, that woman's last question really hit it on the head. How could so many airplanes be hijacked at once? You know, they're talking about checking luggage more carefully and asking passengers more careful questions. I don't think, my gut tells me that wouldn't have had an impact today, that there was something else going on here. Are they talking about stricter security measures from the inside?
Absolutely. They're not detailing what those security measures are for obvious reasons, but the airport spokesperson likened it to flying from Israel. You know, El Al, the Israeli airline, has a tremendous record of safety and not being hijacked. The spokesperson at the airport today said it'll be a little like flying from Israel. And you know that's not fun.
One of the things you notice when you fly internationally is that much of the security at airports is in fact federal security, which we don't have here. These are privately employed people at these various airports, and many of them do a fantastic job. Cameron, thank you very much.
They work as hard as they can.
That is true. Cameron, thank you very much for the latest there at SFO.
It's all just still so hard to believe. And Oakland International Airport also closed down this morning after the FAA gave the order to shut down travel to 30 planes. They were grounded at the airport. Passengers quickly left the terminal after hearing about the terrorist attacks. Police patrolled the area with search dogs, and the airport went to its highest level of security. Many passengers were actually sitting on the tarmac in their planes when they heard about the morning attacks.
And you sit on the plane and hear that something like this happens, and then you imagine all of these other passengers on the planes were doing the same thing, just thinking it was a normal day.
There's no security any place. I can't believe that terrorists got on a plane and hijacked it, and I thought we had tight security.
I didn't really think it was that serious until I went to look at the TV and then saw that Washington was, the Pentagon was bombed too, and I was like, this is really scary. Yeah.
And this is the first time in the airport's history, Oakland Airport, that has been shut down. Police tell us they also searched the Port of Oakland and the ships coming into the port. Now, in the South Bay, San Jose International Airport did not evacuate the terminals. Travelers there were just as concerned about security, and tonight, many of those travelers are stranded. Our Sharon Katsuda is live at San Jose International Airport tonight with the latest. Sharon.
Well, Sandy, the people left stranded are probably at local hotels right now. Now, right now you can see that the runways look pretty much like they have all day. Absolutely no activity here. By noon, as far as travelers were concerned, the airport terminals were deserted. All passengers went home or to nearby hotels as directed by the airport. It's estimated about 25,000 passengers and 400 flights were affected at the San Jose International Airport today. The airport and law enforcement did not send out bomb-sniffing dogs, but as a precaution, they did move all airplanes to the side of the runway, far away from the terminals. Travelers had many questions about their own safety while feeling the nation's pain.
I guess the quick question I have is, how did the hijackers get on board? And how did they pass those security points? And what means did they use by force? Was it a gun? Was it a knife? What was it that actually got through their security point? That's what scares me.
Just devastated. Just cannot believe a human being could do something like that.
I just feel pretty helpless sitting here and knowing the terror that people have experienced and the hardship, and just nothing to do but sit here and watch things unfold.
And earlier today, we told you about the flight from France that was heading over to San Jose. That flight was diverted to Calgary, Canada, and we're told that landed safely at about 1:45 our time. So as far as any flights related to the San Jose International Airport, all those flights are accounted for and they have landed safely. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for the update from San Jose International Airport.
And again, as Sharon just mentioned, the last of those flights into San Jose did land safely. That American flight bound for San Jose from Paris, they landed safely in Calgary, Canada, about 45 minutes ago. America's Tokyo flight was the last one to land at San Jose International. It touched down around 10:30 this morning. The passengers say the flight crew informed them about the attacks just before they landed.
What did they tell you?
They said there was a major terrorist attack in the United States and that they couldn't tell us anymore.
What was going through your mind at that time?
It's been a bad day.
I feel like it's another Pearl Harbor. I think it means war.
American, like the other airlines, are not booking any flights until later this week.
While planes nationwide are grounded indefinitely, all Bay Area bridges and highways remain open tonight.